I challenge you to a duel.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 1 of the Movie Duel podcast with Peter and Liam.
Hello, welcome.
Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural Movie Duel podcast. See, we dropped a little introduction episode before this just to let you know about what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and how the sort of flow of the podcast is going to be, and let you know what our first subject is. But basically, we are picking a subject, each picking a film that we think best fits that subject, and then discussing each movie, our choices, why we chose them, and trying to figure out which one's maybe the better choice. So, Liam, how are you? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. A little bit nervous, first podcast, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about the movies that we've chosen. I think we've got some good ones. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
Definitely, I think we've tried to prep as much as we can prep. We can prep no more. We've got through the marshy wasteland that is Microsoft Teams to finally sort of stumble through this.
Like John Hammond says in Jurassic Park,
when they opened Disneyland in 1956, nothing worked.
Pirates of the Caribbean didn't eat the tourists.
Yes.
Let's get a bit of Spielberg in nice and early.
Yes.
Very good, very good. So, watched any good movies this week?
I actually went to go see Nope the other weekend. That was the only new movie I saw, but I really enjoyed it. I don't want to say too much because I'm pretty sure we're going to discuss it at some point. So yeah, but I really enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went probably a couple of days after you, didn't I? And yeah, just Jordan Peele. He's so fresh at the moment. Even though there's always that little fresh twist to his films.
Yeah, they're always interesting. Like he's doing something different.
Because I really think someone had put something on one of the discussion groups I'm on about Jordan Peele, and they'd been to see Nope, and I really think that he could end up with a very sort of Quentin Tarantino-esque filmography. I think once he gets going, I think he's got that spark to do things that little bit different. And
yeah, and he's definitely got a style. Like you can tell it's one of his movies. So I get that Quentin Tarantino angle definitely. Like he's putting his own spin on different genres, different themes and stuff like that, and it's very Jordan Peele. So I'm really looking forward to whatever he does next. I've enjoyed all of his movies, some more than others, but still they've all been pretty fantastic.
I also caught a film on Amazon Prime. It's apparently, I don't know if they've done more of these. I did read a little bit about it. It was a film called Nocturne.
Okay.
It's a Amazon TV Blumhouse collaboration or something like that.
Right. Okay.
And apparently they're trying to strike up this relationship. I'm not sure if there's anything else in the back catalogue or on its way. But it was decent. It wasn't fantastic. It was sort of Saint Maud, but not as good.
Right. Okay.
Or the perfection. It was decent. It was just trying to be cleverer than it was, really. But it's worth a look if you've got an hour and a half.
Okay, I'll look into it. Have you seen anything about that new Shudder movie called Glorious?
No.
Basically, J.K. Simmons is voicing a glory hole, or some sort of like ethereal monster that lives in a glory hole. So yeah, but
wow, okay.
That's all I know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain that's what I read somewhere. So sounds interesting.
I keep seeing. I'm going to have a look for. It's called. I think it's called What Josiah Saw. That looks quite interesting. Robert Patrick. Not sure.
Right,
I've not
okay.
heard too much about it. I've just seen sort of adverts on Facebook or whatever, sort of short clips and that. But that looks quite interesting. So I may add that to my ever expanding watch list.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff to watch and just not enough time to watch it. I mean, we are sort of in a lucky time right now, having so much so much stuff to consume. But I mean, some of it's good, some of it's not. But you know, you just got to wade yourself through the filth to find the good stuff. But it's out there.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's it. You know, it's like these subjects in these films that we pick. You know, there's some of them I think are going to be very, you know, the choices are going to be quite minimal for some, but the choices for like what we're discussing this week can be quite vast and a lot to choose from. You know, and I think something we didn't perhaps point out in the intro episode was that we're really sort of, you know, we wanted to point out that the very subjective opinions that we've got, and not necessarily objective. You know, the movies that some of them might be movies that mean something to us, or you know, or a style that we like, or
definitely,
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think there's such a rich choice of anything really. So as you know, we stated at the start and in the intro episode, each week we pick a subject. With this first episode, it was my choice. My choice was for us to pick what we consider to be the most underrated sequel ever. So the rules, just to remind you, for this were that it must be a sequel within the main canon of a series, i.e. not a remake or spin-off, unless it's a sequel to a remake or of the remake or spin-off. So it can include reset canons, i.e. Halloween, H2O, things like that, or Halloween. 2018, I suppose it's called. It can't be part of a continuing story, i.e. Lord of the Rings, if it's something part 1, part 2, that kind of thing. And it should be considered either a commercial failure, critical failure, or just generally inferior to its predecessor or predecessors. So, as I picked the subject, it meant that you got first dibs, first pick on the film. So without further ado, Liam, what is the first movie we will be discussing on the Movie Duel podcast? And what do you consider to be the most underrated sequel ever?
Okay, no pressure. Well, my pick for most underrated sequel is the Joe Dante classic Gremlins 2, The New Batch from 1990.
They're mutating.
Sir, is the building on fire?
No, that's a false alarm.
Are you trying to panic New York City?
Absolutely not. So the monsters are real? I didn't say that.
Gremlins 2. The new batch.
Now, was that civilized? No, clearly not. Fun, but in no sense civilized.
So, Gremlins 2, The New Batch was directed by Joe Dante, written by Charles Hass, and based on characters created by Chris Columbus. The film stars Zach Galligan, Phoebe Cates, Howie Mandel as the voice of Gizmo, and we also have Dick Miller returning. Obviously, rest in peace, Dick Miller. Quick synopsis for you. The Gremlins are back, and this time they've taken control of New York City media mogul's high-tech skyscraper. Looney Tunes-esque violence will ensue.
Good choice. I remember having. Well, I don't even think I had it on VHS. I think it was a record. It was recorded off the movie channel on Sky, as it was known back in the day. But yeah, fond memories of Gremlins 2. I think I actually saw Gremlins 2 before the original.
I was just going to say, I had this on video that I had also recorded off TV, and I'd watched this before I'd seen the first one, so I think that's one of the reasons why I've sort of got a bit of a fondness for it.
So why do you feel it's underrated?
Well, the reason I feel like it's underrated is because it not only does what you expect a sequel to do, which is raise the stakes, have more of the same, but it also... The movie itself is a comment on sequels, and it sort of makes fun of the first movie. So, and that's something you don't really see in a sequel. And I think that's what Joe Dante does brilliantly here. He just makes fun of the previous film.
I must admit, when I rewatched it, obviously once you told me what you were picking, it is a lot more meta than I remember. Don't quite sort of pick up when you're perhaps a bit younger. You don't pick up on those sort of the references necessarily. So what do you love about the film?
When I was a kid, the reason I liked this one more was basically because the Gremlins looked a lot cooler, and like I really liked Mohawk, and it was more comedic than the first one. The first one was a straight horror, but this was a bit more silly.
Did they? I couldn't find, or maybe I just didn't dig deep enough. But I couldn't find that. Obviously, you got Mohawk or Stripe or whatever, but I couldn't necessarily find names for the rest of them. So I just sort of wrote them down as like, you've got Crazy, you've got Goofy, you've got Jay-Z, and
Jay-Z,
Lloyd Grossman.
Okay,
there is one of them looks like Jay-Z. I don't know whether that's appropriate.
I think that. Well, the crazy one's Daffy. He's the one with the like googly eyes, and then you've got Lenny, which is like the bucktooth dopey one, and then I think the Jay-Z one you're talking about. I think that's George. So yeah.
And then Lloyd Grossman, who's the one that can talk.
Might I have a brief word with you?
Yeah.
That may be over some people's heads.
Yeah, I guess if you don't know who Lloyd Grossman is. But yeah, that's the brain gremlin, voiced by I think it was Tony Randall. But yeah, I'm very much excited to talk about the design of the gremlins and all that sort of stuff, because there's a hell of a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you can see that difference from 1 to 2. You know, they all have their own individual personalities and different designs and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and I think Chris Walas was the guy who originally did the Gremlins for the first one, and I think Joe Dante did approach him to do the second one, but he was busy directing The Fly too, so he made the right choice, I guess.
Maybe not. Wasn't Phoebe Katz in that as well?
Do you know what? I don't know. I don't think so.
I'll have to Google that. Who plays his girlfriend in it? It's Eric Stoltz, isn't it?
Eric Stoltz, yeah.
Oh, you're going to make me come off my fucking IMDb that I've got prepared.
Okay. But yeah, so they went to Rick Baker instead, and he originally turned them down because he didn't want to just rehash somebody else's design or, just do something that somebody else had done. So they actually said, well, you have free reign. He was more interested about making the Gremlins into characters and putting a unique spin on them, and he definitely did that with Gremlins 2. There's some absolutely fantastic creature work in this film, I think. Why was this movie considered a failure? It didn't actually get terrible reviews. Got a lot better reviews than I thought when I was looking into it. Pretty middle of the road. Like, a lot of movie reviewers didn't hate it, but they didn't love it either. And obviously, like, some of the big movie reviewers, especially in America, like Siskel and Ebert. I know Roger Ebert a bit more, but I think Roger Ebert said there was too many Gremlins and not enough storyline.
Which is the one? Is he the one that's in it?
No, the one that's in it is... Oh, bloody hell. I forgot his name now.
Leonard Maltin.
Leonard Maltin, yeah. Leonard Maltin is the one that's in it. And that's kind of interesting, actually, because he originally gave the first film a really bad review. He didn't like it. He hated it. And that's kind of Joe Dante doing his meta thing. He's having him in it talking about how terrible the first movie is, and then the Gremlins come in and sort of rip him apart, and he's like, no, it's a 10. It's a 10.
Whoa, wait a minute. I'm just kidding. Ow, a 10. It's a 10.
And it's just stuff like that I think makes the movie really fun and interesting. It's just doing these crazy things. But yeah, it didn't get terrible reviews, but there was some that weren't big fans. A lot of them had a problem with like the lack of plot, which I will be honest, yeah, I get that. And a lot of them were saying that the plot takes a backseat as soon as the Gremlins arrive, and yeah, I will agree with that. But it's a Gremlins movie, and the whole idea about Gremlins is that they're chaos and they cause problems in everything, and that includes the movie. And I mean, you even see that halfway through the movie. The film, they're actually messing with the projection, that the film begins to burn and snap, and then it cuts to a whole different scene with Hulk Hogan. The Gremlins putting on a nudie film. It's
only quite recent, actually, that I've realised or seen that or when I recorded it off TV or whatever, it was actually John Wayne.
Yes, yeah,
that's the one I always remember. And I actually, after watching it the other day, it's the version I watched had got the Hulk Hogan bit in. So I went onto YouTube and looked for the John Wayne bit to sort of, because I think definitely the DVD that I had for it had the Hulk Hogan bit. And then I started to doubt myself and think, I'm sure the one I used to watch it had John Wayne. So I found it, and actually, I do actually prefer that. I think that works a lot better.
The John Wayne one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's weird, actually, because I had the inverse. I had only ever seen the Hulk Hogan one, and I don't think it was till like maybe 10, 12 years ago when I got Gremlins on DVD, and I saw that there was an alternate one for the VHS, and I was like, oh my god, I've never seen this before. And it was really cool, actually. I think I do prefer the Hulk Hogan one, not because of Hulk Hogan, but I think there's like a little in-joke that Joe Dante says in the commentary. There's a little girl and her mother, and they run out of the cinema, and she's complaining that the movie's terrible and all this sort of stuff. And the little girl's just saying, I want to see the Gremlins. And that's actually a true story that happened when Joe Dante did a screening of the first film, that when the gremlin was put in the microwave and exploded, this mother was horrified and disgusted and wanted to leave, but her daughter ran away from her, went back into the screening and hid so she could watch the rest of the film because she wanted to see the Gremlins. So that's like a little nod from Joe Dante there. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why I like that version. And also the projectionist who comes down, he's got like a black eye and everything like that. He's the guy from the gas station in the first movie that Billy's dad sells him the smokeless ashtray. And I was just like, oh yeah. And that's Joe Dante all over. He'll have people from all of his movies. You know, he has the same cast a lot of the time.
You would think really that maybe the mother and daughter would be running out of the cinema screen because there's a 6'6" man sat in his pants eating popcorn, sweating profusely.
Come on, brother. Brother.
Do I have to come up there myself? Do you think the Grimsters can stand up to the Hulkster? Well, if I were you, I'd run the rest of Gremlins too, right now. Sorry, folks. It won't happen again.
So yeah, it's kind of weird, but I do enjoy that little John Wayne sequence. But like a movie that does that, like I don't really think about it because I only ever saw this movie either on TV, VHS, or DVD. Like I was never actually there to see it in the cinema. And then when you go into this movie blind, not knowing anything, and you sit there, and then all of a sudden the film burns up, it goes to white, and you're like, what? And then Gremlins start invading the screen, doing shadow puppets and stuff like that, and you're like, oh my god, like is that even breaking the fourth wall anymore? It's like, this is crazy. And that's the whole thing about Gremlins 2, is that it's just chaos, it's anarchy.
Yeah,
you know, it's got that Looney Tunes sort of vibe to it. It's just crazy, and that's why I think it's so good.
I think as well, if the Hollywood sort of thing, especially 1990, as you know, my choice is from 1990, and you have quite a lot around that sort of time. Very sort of a sequel frenzy almost, and I think you can tell where a studio maybe wouldn't think of a property or a film series in quite, they wouldn't consider it box office if they're not putting out another sequel, and there's never been another sequel to Gremlins.
That actually brings me on to a good quote, because I just want to read this quote that I'd got from Joe Dante, and it's, when I was asked to do the sequel, which I originally turned down because it was so hard to make the first one, the only reason I decided to make the sequel was because years later they had tried to make a sequel and couldn't figure out how to do it. And they really wanted another one. So they said to me, if you give us a couple of cans of film with Gremlins in them, next summer you can do whatever you want. And they gave me 3 times the money we had to make the first one. So I made Gremlins 2, which was essentially about how there didn't need to be a sequel to Gremlins. And he said that in the commentary as well, that like he wanted to make it incredibly hard for them to make a Gremlins 3 after this movie. So, I salute somebody who wants to shit all over the first movie that they made and just have like a fun time. And that's why I think it's great. And that's why I love Joe Dante, because he put so much of himself in this film. His sense of humor, that whole Looney Tunes type, silly, cartoonish tone that this movie has. And it's definitely his most Joe Dante film.
Cool.
And also, I'd just like to say, I'm not going to give away your pick, but it's kind of nice that both of our movies have 2 in the title. Like, you don't see that anymore. So that's kind of
definitely
nice.
I think it's almost become a bit of a I don't know, a badge of shame, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
That if it was 2, sequels are often considered inferior. Which I think is fine. It's not very often you get a sequel that is is better. I think there's a lot of argument in that. I think there's a lot of discussion there as well, but I don't think you can always consider something to be massively inferior.
No, and I think one of the problems with sequels is, especially in the 80s and 90s, it was sort of, to do a sequel, you're basically rehashing the same movie, the first film. It's either going to be in a different scenario, or, you know, it's going to be, instead of Die Hard in a building, we're going to do Die Hard on a plane. Or Under Siege, instead of a boat, it's now going to be on a train. But we're going to do exactly the same thing, sort of. So they're kind of, you can see why they are considered inferior. But I think, again, that's why I think Gremlins 2 is interesting, because it's doing something so different. And I sort of applaud that. And I wouldn't say that's necessarily how you would go about doing a sequel, is by making fun of the first movie. But I just think that fits the tone of Gremlins.
It almost moves the story, doesn't it? Because the first film is almost Billy and Gizmo's story. And I was actually quite surprised again on rewatch how little Gizmo's in this film.
Yeah.
Because he's off training and all that sort of stuff. So he's not...
Yeah.
You know, once they sort of lose him, he's not really part of the main story of, you know, moving the plot along until he turns up and does whatever. But I think this...
I mean, he's got his own little character arc. Like, you know, he learns to stand up for himself.
This is more the Gremlins movie.
That's, I think, what people want.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Steven Spielberg said when they did the first screening that there's too many Gremlins. There's too many. And for me, you know, I'm happy with more Gremlins because they're just great. And, like, there's a gag every minute, every second. There's just something they do that's so silly and so funny. And I love it.
Do you find that there's maybe a little bit too much slapstick from the non-Gremlin characters?
I don't think so. I don't think it bothered me. I think because the movie is so cartoonish and slapstick itself, that it didn't bother me that the human characters were a bit more silly. No, I don't think that bothered me at all. I think it probably just made me like it even more, actually, the fact that it is a bit silly.
Did it bother you? Because I've watched Gremlins 2 now in the times I couldn't count, really. But I think watching it with a bit more of an eye of making notes and things like that, for the purposes of the podcast, I thought, Billy's moved to New York.
Yeah.
Why has he never been to see Gizmo?
I don't know.
Because he knows his dad's taking him back to Mr.
Is it Wing? I think it's Mr. Wing.
Mr. Wing.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess, does he know where the shop is? I suppose he knows it's someplace in Chinatown because he says that in the first movie. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how long they've been in New York or anything like that. It's not really explained that much.
But I suppose it's not the point, I suppose, is it?
No, not really. And I mean, let's be perfectly honest. I don't think Billy's the star of either of the Gremlins movies, as much as, like, I like Zach Galligan in these films. Like, everybody wants to see this for Gizmo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, you know, and that's why we sort of get Gizmo straight away right at the start. It's like, bam, he's there. Mm-hmm. He's had a little bit of a redesign thanks to Rick Baker. I do like the original look of Gizmo, maybe a little bit more, because this version's quite cute and cartoonish, but I still think he looks great. I'm really impressed with the puppets in this film. Mm. I'm hard pressed to think about another puppet movie that's better than this. Mm-hmm. This is 1990s, and some of the stuff that they do in this is fantastic. Especially, I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but they had some sort of technique that they did to make the mouths of the puppets move with the recorded speech. So when the brain gremlin starts doing his little speech, it's just his lips move to the words. Like it looks like it's coming out of his mouth, and it's just brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, what Rick Baker did in this is amazing. They still look great now, and I mean, I watched this movie on Blu-ray, and they look great. You know, I wouldn't have a problem with if they ever did do another Gremlins movie, which I don't want them to. You know, I'd want them to do puppets. Like, I'd hate to see it CGI, because there's an art form in this. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's what makes these movies so special, is because that somebody had to figure out how to do this and had to work, you know, 12-hour days trying to get, like, Gizmo to move from one side of the table to the other or something. Like, it's dedication, and I just think having that done as CGI is just a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, because I know somebody has to sit there and render it, but it's just not, the heart's not there.
Yeah.
The fact that somebody had sculpted this and built this and made it move and gave it life, that's why they're so cool. Like these puppets are so cool.
You see, I've always wanted to see another Gremlins film because I've always wanted to see Gizmo turn into a gremlin.
Yeah, see, I've heard people say that, and I don't know. Do I?
Because I think it would just be an interesting dynamic. I think because the Gremlins aren't Gremlins because they're Gremlins. They all have their own personality. You know, it's not like they go from cute to being bad. They're bad being cute. They're bad as they are when they're cute or when they're mogwais or whatever.
Yeah.
But then obviously they become stronger and grimier and whatever.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to for me anyway. I think it'd be interesting to see that dynamic if Gizmo ate after midnight and he, you know, because he's still going to be Gizmo, and he's not going to be.
Yeah, but I guess do we love Gizmo because he's this cute little furry, lovable creature, and then if we change him into a gremlin, and there's no way for him to go back to be a mogwai again, so now we've got this new sort of Baby Yoda looking type thing that's Gizmo now. And I don't know, I feel like it's interesting to think about it, but I don't know if I'd want to see it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what about the sort of characters? Do you think they sort of stand up to the original?
Well, there's definitely more characters. The original was pretty streamlined. I mean, you just had basically Billy and Kate, and then the great Dick Miller and a few others. But in this one, you've obviously got Christopher Lee, who's fantastic, who plays Dr. Catheter.
Oh, splendid. This must be my malaria. Just rabies. I've got rabies.
I know. I didn't realise until this the first time I've watched this and realised his name was Dr. Catheter.
Yeah, he's Dr. Catheter. And see, there's so many jokes and stuff that go on in that little lab that he works in, the Splice of Life.
Yeah.
And it's just great.
A nice little cameo from Raymond Cruz.
Oh, da 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 da. Oh, isn't that by Sting?
Yes. Yeah. And oh God, who's the for the life of me, it's gone. Oh, the guy who plays the cleaner who gets Gizmo wet. I think he's the original Gomez.
John Astin.
Yeah, he's the original Gomez. Yeah, so that was kind of cool. And so that was great. And it's also got the twins from Terminator 2.
Well, Lewis, it's like I've always said. If you want to find something weird, you have to go downtown.
There are a lot of sort of 80s, 90s character actors in this. It's like a who's who of 90s, 80s, 90s people.
I don't know her real name, but the woman who plays Marla, I really liked her. She was good. Bit crazy, fast talking, you know, will do anything to get to the top sort of thing. She was interesting.
I was used to be obsessed with the Canadian moose when they go for dinner.
Oh yeah,
it's like, how would you eat that? But it does look tasty.
Yeah,
as well
it does.
At the same time.
Shea Winnipeg, I think it's called. How about some horns, sir? Yeah, it's great. Dick Miller's great. I mean, I love Dick Miller as Mr. Futterman, and the fact that I love it when he turns up at Billy and Kate's apartment and you can hear the little gremlin and he's like, "What's that?" And he's so crazy. Yeah. And he's like, "I heard it too, dear." He's like, "Of course you heard it." John Glover as Clamp. He's great. Yeah, he's...
John Glover, yeah. Chin for days.
He's clearly doing this like Trump guy. He's awesome. I love him.
Oh, wouldn't tar him with that brush.
Well, I think that's like the character he's supposed to be playing, like this sort of media mogul or, you know, millionaire spending money, buying up half of New York, you know, a bit of an idiot, that sort of thing. But like he's kind of lovable. You know, like, he's not the villain.
Hey, this is excellent.
Also, Robert Picardo, who's been in another Joe Dante movie, Inner Space, as the cowboy.
He was in The Howling as well.
Yes, The Howling. Yeah, it's weird because like I'm always used to seeing Robert Picardo like at that certain age, and maybe it's because he's got like either the balding hair or like a wig on or something like that. But in The Howling, he's quite young. Is he Eddie? I think.
Yeah,
he's got long hair.
He's the sort of main guy, isn't he?
Yeah, the main werewolf killer guy. Yeah, he looks like smacked out of his face and all that sort of stuff. But Robert Picardo is great in this. His scenes with Greta, the lady gremlin, are great. I mean, that's how you end a movie.
Dear.
With reptile loving.
This is a complete failure of management.
How did you, in your sort of researching that, how did this whole sort of Looney Tunes start and the beginning, and that was it some kind of anniversary year for Looney Tunes or something?
No, it was Chuck Jones, who's like the main animator, I think, of like Bugs Bunny and all that sort of Warner Brothers cartoon stuff. Him and Joe Dante are actually friends, and he was actually in the first Gremlins. He's in the bar talking to Billy about his drawing that he's doing of Mrs. Deagle. And Joe Dante asked him to do this animation, this cartoon for Gremlins, specifically for Gremlins, because he wanted to set up the tone. Okay. So when people would see this Looney Tunes cartoon, that they would, all right, the movie's going to be silly like this. And there was actually a longer cartoon, but it got cut. So it was just sort of that silly little intro, which I always loved as a kid, and I still love now because I'm a big fan of Daffy Duck. So yeah, that's where that came from. It sort of wanted to set up this anarchic tone, this silly tone for this silly movie, basically. And I think there's a bit at the end credits as well where Daffy turns up and he's like, "Are you still here?"
Yes.
And all this sort of stuff, which is kind of fun. So yeah, that's where that came from. I would also like to say that I'm a big fan of John Hora, I think it is. He's a cinematographer that works with Joe Dante a few times. I think he's done, he did Howlin', Matinee. I think he did the first Gremlins as well. There's like a lot of shadow work in this film, a lot of Venetian blinds, lots of gremlin shadows as they're like scurrying away. Obviously, the one I'm thinking of is the one where Mohawk drinks the spider potion. And you see the legs coming out of him, but you don't actually see it. You just see the shadow. I just think that's great. And also the set design, I think, is really cool. I mean, this whole clamp tower, the building where nothing works, which is really fun. And what's his name? Grandpa Fred, or is that character
Fred,
from the Monsters?
Yeah. I was going to say he's another sort of,
this crazy character, especially when he's walking around the lobby and all these people are looking at him, but he's just dressed up like Dracula. It's great. He's really good at it. Him and his the Japanese tourist. I don't know if it's Mr. Katsuji or whatever, but he's great. I need a Polaroid. He's so good. He's his cameraman.
Work a camera. I am the camera.
And oh god, what's her name? I don't know the actress's name, but she was another one who was in loads at that time. Who plays Mar? Is it Mar? Oh god, what is it? Microwave. It's a cooking show with.
Yeah, Microwave with Marge. She's just pissed up drinking all that sherry.
Love it.
Yeah, it's great. That whole scene is really cool because it's like one of those sort of sequel things where we're going to have a nod to the original. So like in the first movie, one of the gremlins gets killed by a microwave. So now this time the gremlins are going to kill a microwave. It's kind of fun.
It is pretty. I mean, it's pretty. There's some pretty horrific scenes in this. I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I must have been 1997, probably 8 or 9 when I first watched this. And there's some. I always remember. The Bat Gremlin freaked me out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And the whole sort of gargoyle thing was always creeped me out.
Okay.
But there's a lot. It's pretty gory as well, even compared to the first.
I guess so. I think the first movie is kind of a bit more of a straight horror film. But obviously it has its silly parts, but I think this is more silly. There's some scary bits. I mean, there's some serious stuff, but it's like Christopher Lee just gets gunned down in like an Uzi drive-by by Mohawk. Oh no, he doesn't know that's fucking hell. He gets electrocuted by the electric gremlin, and then Mohawk turns up and starts wasting fools.
Somebody gets shot though, don't they?
I don't think so. I know Billy gets fired at.
Maybe not. Because it's the shoot. Is it the shoot? Doesn't the shoot in the gun blows up the thing that makes the sort of Phantom of the Opera one or something?
No, I think there's where one of the gremlins picks up the little vial of acid and it says "Do not throw in face," and he literally just throws it in his face, and then he gets the little Phantom of the Opera thing. That's a whole great scene in that lab where they're all messing with the little potions and all that sort of stuff, especially the vegetable gremlin. And that's a really great special effect, like the way its ears sort of like shrink in and start turning into leaves, and they start sprouting tomatoes from his scalp, and he just like this uncontrollable belching.
That creature is eating my vegetable medley.
It's just great when the brain gremlin drinks that brain hormone, and he goes into like a reverse Dr. Jekyll. So he goes from a monster into a really incredibly smart person, and it's just that whole speech is just fantastic. I love that.
I wanna talk a little bit about what's going on in this room, because I think there are some fascinating ramifications here for the future.
I did also want to mention the score by Jerry Goldsmith, the great Jerry Goldsmith. He did the score for the first film. I think he's pretty much done most of Joe Dante's films as well. But yeah, I think his score for this film in particular is one of my favourite scores from Jerry Goldsmith, obviously aside from Alien. But I think this one is so fun, and it's so much like the movie. It's so chaotic. Like, it has obviously the New York medley, and then the little Rambo bit for Gizmo, and then the Gremlin rag and all that sort of stuff. It's just a really good score, especially near the end when the Gremlins get melted, and it's just got this eerie score, and I just think it's so fun but so horrifying as well. It's a score that I listen to a lot. It's just fantastic. And the scene where Gizmo finally stands up for himself and he John Rambo's Spider Gremlin with a little bow and arrow.
Tipex.
I guess they just pushed him too far. Yeah, the score is great, and again with like a little nod and a joke of the original. So when Phoebe Cates is talking about how her dad dressed up as Santa and broke his neck and died, and it's like, well, this is a bummer.
Enabling.
And then she goes into she starts to go into like how she was possibly molested as a child in a park, but Billy's like, we haven't got time for this. It's just like, this is so disturbing and random, but no, whatever, we ain't got time for this. We have to kill all these gremlins.
I definitely agree with you on the score. I think it's got that, the thing. It's something I like, where it's using the core sort of the theme, the Gremlins theme in it, but it changes it up for the different moods of the parts of the movie and stuff, and the creepy bits are slower and more intense, and and it's ramped up for the chaos and all that sort of thing.
Nobody really talks about Jerry Goldsmith that much, and I think they really should do, because his scores are brilliant. And like I say, for this one, it's just amazing. Like, he did all the little musical cues for the Movie Police, the Leonard Maltin movie review show and stuff like that. It's just a brilliant score. I love it. I listen to it a lot because it's just fun, and it always makes me think of Gremlins, and I love the score. It's fantastic.
So anything else you want to sort of throw into the mix?
I think all I've got to say really is, like, the reason I picked this movie is because, like I said, it was so different from the first movie. It's a director doing something, he could do whatever he wanted to do, and that's great. This movie pokes fun at the first film. It's very meta. It's there's a lot of social commentary in it. It's referencing other movies, Joe Dante movies, and movies that he likes, and he's doing his own thing. He's being Joe Dante and putting everything of himself into this film. And I like that. I respect that. I like that he's done something different, and it is very different from the first movie. Like, they could have easily just done another sort of straight up horror. The same thing happens again, or what have you. But the fact that they went back to Joe Dante because he basically was the only guy that could do it right, and he was like, well, the only way to do it is to make fun of it. And the Gremlins are chaos, so this movie should be chaos, and that's what it is. Yeah, I'm sorry if we have to sacrifice the plot a little bit or whatever. It's pure carnage, and I like that.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think if you see it as what it is, and that's a conscious effort to do so, then it works, doesn't it? It's not like they're just doing it for the sake of doing it. It's the point, I suppose. The whole point of the movie. Yeah, and
I mean, it was a bit of a financial failure. I think the budget was around about either 40 to 50 million, and I think it lost 10 million. So it didn't do great. So I think that's one of the reasons why it is also considered underrated, because it was a financial failure. And I think, aside from the fact that they don't really know what to do with another Gremlins movie, and the fact that it's been so long now. I don't know if they would do a Gremlins 3. They would probably just do a straight reboot. And I mean, I know they are doing a cartoon that's supposed to be coming out at some point, so I guess we'll just have to see what happens with that.
I think that's the plan is to see how that goes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But then, I think it's been very hit and miss with what we call requels now.
Yeah.
So it could be interesting. I think if it's done right, it could be good.
Yeah, I mean, considered to other like IPs like Jurassic Park and Star Wars and things like that, like Gremlins is popular, but it's not super popular. So I think that's one of the reasons why they probably haven't decided to do another one, because I don't know, there's not legions of fans wanting another one like there are with Star Wars, or they're not going to build a theme park for Gremlins, and that's another reason why I like it, is because maybe it hasn't got that huge fan base. It has loyal fans and people that love it, like me, but I'm just one of these people that's very much less is more. Like, what more can you do? Like, Gremlins 2 did everything for me, and I don't really need another one, so I'm very happy with what we've got. So
okay.
And I love Joe Dante, that's all I have to say, really. So, and I'm sure I'll be talking about more of his movies, because I think he's a very underrated director. He's brilliant. He's done a lot of good films. I know he's probably done some that weren't great, but, they weren't awful. He's definitely made some really strong movies, and not a lot of people talk about him, and I think he deserves to be talked about a lot more, because he's a good director.
He's maybe, what has he done recently? I can't think of anything. The box, not the box, the Hole. Did he do The Hole?
Yeah, I think that was the last film he's done. I know he's done some stuff. He did an anthology type movie. I can't remember what it was called, but he did one segment for that, and I think that's the last time he's directed. But yeah, like a lot of his movies, Gremlins, Inner Space, Explorers, The Burbs, brilliant. Yeah, he's done a lot of good movies. Erie, Indiana, if you remember that TV show, he directed a few episodes of that. He's a great director, and a lot of his movies are fun, and that's what I like about it. He doesn't take himself too seriously. A Joe Dante movie is a Joe Dante movie. It's going to be a fun ride. It's nothing serious, and that's what I like.
Okay, so should we move on to my selection?
Yes, let's move on.
Let's do that. So this was in my mind when I sort of came up with the subject for us to discuss. This was the film that really sort of, I mean, I can think of other examples, and I'll give them a bit later on. But I was pleased that you didn't pick this, because it's something really was keen to discuss. And so my pick for this week is Predator 2 from 1990.
It landed in the world's most forbidding jungle. It came for the thrill of the hunt. Now, it's coming to a different kind of jungle.
You don't know what you're dealing with.
This time, it's open season on all of us. Danny Glover, Gary Busey, Ruben Blades, Maria Conchita Alonso, Bill Paxton. Predator 2. Hunting season opens again this Christmas.
Also 1990.
Yes. Quite a lot of similarities, really. We've both got movies from the 90s and their creature features.
Definitely. Directed by Stephen Hopkins, starring Danny Glover, Gary Busey, Kevin Peter Hall, Ruben Blades, my terrible Mexican accent, Maria Conchita Alonso, and Bill Paxton, everybody's favourite. God rest his soul.
We love you, Bill.
So, in Predator 2, the Predator returns to Earth, this time to stake claim on the war-torn streets of a dystopian Los Angeles in 1997. So, what sort of drove me to pick Predator 2 was, my interpretation was that it was definitely considered inferior to the original Predator, 1987. And I didn't actually quite realise how inferior it is considered, or it was at the time. It's definitely picked up a kind of cult following. But this really sort of cemented it for me. Was just, you know, looking through the Rotten Tomato scores. So obviously the sort of review scores. The original Predator, 1987, 80%. Predators, which was 2009, 2010? 2010, I think.
Yeah, 2010.
65%. The Predator, 33%. Predator 2, 30%. It is the lowest ranked Predator film by critics.
That's not right. That's not good.
According to my research. So it really, really cemented how underrated this film is.
Yeah.
You know, when you look just at IMDb scores, it's 6.3 out of 10, which, you know, puts it more in the sort of 65% bracket, really. And I think it's just a massive shame, because I really think as a sequel, it's really strong. I can't. So I'll give you some examples. So Roger Ebert said that it was unoriginal, uninteresting in terms of its special effects.
Okay.
Entertainment Weekly said it was a grimly incoherent pile of urban blowout cliches. And
okay.
Jay Scott from Globe and Mail in Toronto said it was racist and violent, atrociously acted, and ham-handedly directed.
I strongly disagree.
So I do. I mean, you know, Ebert said it was unoriginal. Yes, it's taking that basic concept of a predator coming to Earth and hunting for trophies. That's what they do. That's, you know, if you're making a sequel, it's going to run along those lines.
Yeah.
Or you'd expect it to. But it, you know, it expands on the original idea. It almost adds a little bit more of an additional sort of motive to the predator. You know, obviously in the first one you're seeing it as just this, it's just out in the jungle, it's hunting. This one, it comes across a bit more of, you know, it's trying to get to Harrigan.
Yeah, it's a bit more calculating. It's toying with him, really.
Exactly. You know, uninteresting special effects. I don't see how you can say that. I think you've got this increased sort of expanded weaponry of the predator that's allowing for something different, you know, in terms of things like the kills and everything else. I think there's a couple of places where the invisible predator look is a little bit wobbly early on.
Yeah,
but
I will get that. Yeah,
I just don't get that.
Yeah, and I think, like my film, my pick, the special effect artist was Rick Baker, and like if you were to say the special effect artist who worked on Predator 2, I don't think you can say he's done a bad film. Like he was the best special effect artist in Hollywood for a long time. So, and I can't see anything of the practical effects in Predator 2 where it's terrible. I think even now, Predator 1 and Predator 2 still have the best designed predators and the best looking predators in any of the films.
Yeah, well, that's it. You can see that Stan Winston mark on this film for definite. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any Stan Winston effects or film that he was involved in that you could say is uninteresting. Really.
Well, he always said that he wasn't creating monsters, he was creating characters, and that's how he treated them. And I think that's one of the reasons why they always were so well acted and so well designed. He put so much thought into it, him and his team. Like, yeah, I don't agree with that. They're brilliant special effects.
You know, and yeah, I suppose, you know, it's a grim, incoherent pile of urban blowout cliches. That's you could probably argue that a little bit in places, but I think, you know, it adapts as the story goes on, and you get things that are a little bit more different and fit the story and fit the plot as it moves along. I think any early 90s action film, you're going to have cliches. I think.
Oh God, yeah.
In any, you can push yourself 10 years later, and you're still going to find those cliches. You can push yourself another 10 years further, and you're still going to find those cliches because that's what people are looking for in an action film.
Oh yeah, of course, especially those 80s and 90s ones, those early 90s ones, just full of that stuff. And that's part of the fun, especially going back and watching them now.
Yeah, and I mean, the point of it being racist, it's easy for me to say as a white man, that
yeah,
I don't think it's racist. I mean, even Roger Ebert said, there are subliminal clues to encourage us to subconsciously connect the menace with that of black males, which I don't necessarily sort of see.
No.
And I'm talking, purely from my standpoint as a white man. But, there is obviously points. You've got a Jamaican gang, you've got a Colombian gang, and there are massive stereotypes in there.
Yeah.
For one,
yeah.
Jamaican voodoo posse, and voodoo, they don't practice voodoo in Jamaica at all. It's
No.
purely a Haitian religion.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at a little bit of history of gangs in Los Angeles, there are different nationalities. None of those nationalities and major gangs in LA are Jamaican, and they're not really Colombian either. From what I can see in sort of research, I think the problem that it could have maybe not been quite so on the nose of having both of these gangs being foreign nationals or whatever. But I don't think you can sit and say that this movie's setting out to be racist or make you think.
No, well, I mean, the protagonist is Danny Glover, a black guy, and everyone in the police force is quite diverse. And I mean, I love that one tracking shot that goes all the way through the police station. You see all the people working there, dealing with all the either criminals or people complaining, and it just keeps going until it goes on to Bill Paxton.
Oh, there are some lovely shots in this.
Oh God, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm not quite as up on the cinematography as yourself, but I think there's like one shot towards the end where there's been the attack on the subway, on the train, and Maria Conchita Alonso's character, I forget her name, completely popped out of my head, but she obviously gets everyone away, goes back into the end thingy and finds Jerry Lambert hanging up. But it's a beautiful one shot where she steps back out of the train, goes to move away, and the predator is just there, and it's all done in sort of a one shot, and it pulls out. Oh, it's just, but like you say, like that tracking shot all the way through the police station.
I was just gonna say the subway scene. I really like the shot when the predator is crawling on top of the train, and then you have the flashes. It goes dark, and then we see it dark, and we see it dark, and we see it, and it's moving along. I just think that's really ominous, and it's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think that whole sequence is pretty. It just messes with your senses.
Yeah.
It's almost like a bit of a head fuck because you don't see everything that's going on. You've got the flashing, you've got darkness, you've got the invisibility, the cloaking device and everything else. It is just a very, very brutal sequence.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, Stephen Hopkins directed. I mean, he has his moments. I think if you look at his career, he did Nightmare on Elm Street 5, which is probably one of the worst.
Yeah.
Always one of the worst. A favourite of ours, The Ghost and the Darkness.
Yeah.
Lost in Space.
Yeah.
He did some episodes of 24. It's not something that I was really a fan of.
Me neither, really.
But, he does a good job on this. I think with the obviously with the big budget, I think he does as well as he can do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can definitely tell like he's a competent director. He knows what he's doing. I think so. With some of the shots and the way he's telling things visually, I think it's a well-directed movie. And like you say, the cinematography is great. So yeah, I think for someone of his caliber to take on a movie like this, and I know you've watched and we both have, the making of Predator 2.
Oh yes, we will get into that.
Yeah, him tackling this, I think he did a really good job. I don't think he gets enough credit for this movie. I think it's well directed, beautifully shot. He gets good performances out of the actors. I don't think you couldn't ask for more, really.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think there's again a smorgasbord of 90s sort of character actors in this. You've got Danny Glover, who I must admit, I remember the first time I sort of watched Predator 2. You sort of think, well, is he really an action hero? And maybe my first sort of couple of viewings, or especially when I was younger, you don't necessarily sort of think about that. But as you watch it now, watching it with sort of older eyes, you see, he's streetwise.
Phil, this is quite a surprise. What brings you down from the palace?
He does command what he's doing. I almost sort of see him as he's almost a blend of Riggs and Murtaugh.
Well, cooperation is my middle name.
Into sort of one, without the goofiness of Riggs, and he's got a very sort of he's very commanding in this film.
Yeah,
and he plays it well. He plays what he's getting across. He's playing somebody who's just sort of pushed and prodded, and not just by obviously the Predator, but you've got Mr. Gary Busey.
You got a big nose, and you're sticking it too far in my business. Now maybe you can hear this. The next time you cross me, you're going to turn it missing.
Yes.
Talked about John Glover and having chin for days. Gary Busey's got teeth for days.
Oh, God. We love Gary Busey.
Yeah. I mean, just look, I would recommend to anybody, pop onto YouTube because it's on there at the moment, is the making of Predator 2. Which is it's a bit of a mixture of old and new footage, from that, especially during the 90s. They did these making ofs on the sets of the big sort of blockbuster films. But Gary Busey is just...
He's a force to be reckoned with.
A sight to behold. Force to be reckoned with, that's the one. And you could start your own little drinking game for how many times he says otherworld life force.
But anyway, these outer world life forces...
Just within the 30 minutes of that documentary. But while we're talking about that making of documentary, obviously, my first protocol for researching this podcast was to go through the reviews, as I said, and sort of picked up these little sort of nuggets of people saying that the film's racist, and it just sort of tickled me a little bit that at one point in this documentary, Stan Winston's talking about the designs of the new Predator and the new Predators. Because obviously by the end of the film, there's more than one, which they were played by, I believe, some of the LA Lakers basketball team. And Stan Winston at one point says, there are subtle differences, but to the average person, or the average public, they all look alike.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, really? Oh dear. But, there we go.
Yeah.
I just thought that sort of tickled me a little bit, thinking this film's not racist.
Yeah.
No, there's not a racist inch in the making of this film. And then Stan Winston goes and drops that. But there we go.
Well, I would say about that, the making of, it's kind of interesting because it just goes to show, like, when they're doing a making of featurette now, how polished it is and how clean it is. But back then, it was just sort of like you get to see everything, like Gary Busey's interactions with the other actors and the filmmakers talking honestly about certain scenes and swearing, and we get to see little snippets like that. Just would not happen now. It would not go. So it's kind of nice to see that. It's kind of like how everyone is interacting with each other. It's just goes to show like what it must have been like on the set and how these actors were off screen and stuff like that.
And Stephen Hopkins getting death threats.
Yeah.
For embarrassing Ruben Blades.
Yes.
Well, he says Ruben Blades.
I knew of Ruben Blades
throughout this documentary, and when you watch the trailer, it's Ruben Blades.
Ruben Blades.
So Blades. But yes, for interrupting, I think it was Good Morning America. Ruben Blades.
Ruben Blades.
Was doing an interview, and basically Stephen Hopkins told him to get the foot back to work.
Yeah.
And then had to go on and apologise because he got death threats from the Latino community. And
I go home, I wake up that night to do the next night shooting with like 100,000 messages in the answering machine because I didn't realise I'd taken him off live. He was being interviewed by Joe in London from New York live on Good Morning America. And so I was in deadly trouble because I'd, cursed on screen in front of many millions of people. And it looked like I treated Ruben badly, who was a sort of a Latino icon. And I got death threats on the phone and all sorts of terrible things. And of course, I didn't mean to do any of that. So we shot the next night. And then after shooting the next night, Ruben and I went to a studio in downtown LA, and we were going to do something mischievous, like have a fight. But we didn't, and then I had to talk to a camera, and we got interviewed by Joan London from New York, and actually since then they've never done a live interview.
And there was the story about them getting piss and shit thrown at them and stuff. And
yeah, it's mental. That alleyway scene,
But I mean, in terms of the film and how it sort of moves along, it gets straight into the action. There is a strong assumption that you've seen Predator, the original. So you do it, but it gets in. You get that. It sets the scene. You've got the heat wave, the gang wars. There is a little bit of sort of scene setting dialogue early on in those first sort of sequences that's a bit shaky. It's there to sort of, and unfortunately most of it goes to Maria Conchita Alonso. She gets a lot of the very shitty dialogue in especially in the beginning.
They're trying to get inside the headquarters. We're keeping them pinned down, but those officers are bleeding to death. Fuck! They're dying, man.
It's just sort of telling everybody what's going on without us being shown it, I guess, really, isn't it? And
yeah, and you've got, like I said, you've got Danny Glover there being, he's not being wisecracking like Arnie. He's not dropping all the massive one-liners and all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit. It's almost a bit more believable, I suppose. And then of course you've got the incomparable Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
Who just lights up everything that he's in, basically.
So I go in for my physical, right? And the doctor says, I need a semen, stool, and urine sample. I say, gee, doc, I'm in a big hurry. Can I just leave my underwear?
This is where he cements his legacy as being the first to be killed by a Terminator, alien, and a Predator. Supposedly. You don't really get clarification in the Terminator, but we're given that before Lance Hendrickson stole a bit of his thunder. But yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of shakiness in some of those early scenes. There was a couple of people in this film that I just thought were a little bit superfluous, really. You got like Robert Davey, who plays the captain, but then you've also got another captain, which is very strange. Kent McCord, who plays Captain Pilgrim, who's probably the most pointy captain in the world. He's very, you're doing this, you shouldn't do this, and he's pointing his finger quite a lot, which is a little bit distracting and very wooden. But yeah, it just seems to have characters for character's sake in some places. It could have been maybe trimmed down a little bit, but it moves very swiftly. There's not really an ounce of fat in terms of the action.
it is pretty fast paced, and it moves from like one action set piece to another, which I really like. So there was never a moment when you're watching Predator 2 when you're bored or you feel like, oh, it's dragging a bit now. It is pretty fast paced, and I like that. And I really like the start, because it reminds me of Alien 3 a little bit, you know, when the 20th Century Fox logo starts and it does the normal, and then it drowns out and you start hearing this like weird otherworldly, and it's like, this movie's going to be different. And then Predator 2 starts like that, and it's just that horrible scream that starts, and then you see the jungle and you're like, oh, the jungle, and then it's boom, city, Predator 2. I just think that's a really cool start. I really like that. And then you're getting straight into heat vision as well. It's really...
Yeah, I mean, you got, you know, it's consistent throughout, I think, in terms of sweatiness.
Yeah.
You know, you're really depicting a heat wave. You know, I think it could be something that could get overlooked in the odd scene here and there, but everybody is suitably sweaty throughout this film, which, you know, really, you know, it follows on that it has that consistency from. But then, you know, we get into some movie magic. We start to meet some of these gangs, starting with, or a scene that starts with probably the gruntiest sex scene ever, heard from miles away.
I love that shot too, by the way. I don't know what it's called, but I should have researched that. But it's just sort of zooming in and then zooming in and zooming in until we see them. Yeah, it's great. It's
fantastic. And we get our first introduction to the Jamaican voodoo posse.
Yeah.
And the fucking voodoo magic man.
Voodoo magic. Fucking voodoo magic, man.
But yeah, you know, and I think, you know, it doesn't shy away from that. You know, these guys, this gang, this Jamaican gang, they're using it as a terror tactic. You know, and they say that in the film. It's not like they're just portraying them to be some crazy voodoo gang,
mindless killers or anything like that. Yeah, they have a purpose.
Yeah, you know, it's done, and you know, and it makes sense. It makes sense if these guys are killers, that the Predator's going to go after them. You know that action sequence is very inventive. You get a look at new weapons, a look at the Predator, you know, the updated sort of armor and all that sort of thing. And again, you know, I mean, I don't know what it is about it. Again, if it's a particular kind of shot, if it's got a name for it, but it's the bit where he says,
"Shit happens."
And I don't know, it's just sort of really weirdly sort of shot, like the background doesn't really fit in with it, and it's the close-up of his face as he turns.
That extreme close-up, and like the background's all blurred out. Yeah, that's a good shot. And I also like, I think where your movie is a lot better than mine is because Gremlins is sort of like a bit of a Die Hard situation, like pretty much the majority of it is in one location, in that clamp tower, but Predator 2, you have all these different locations. So you have like the police station, the scene at the start, on the street, the alleyway, the Predator ship, the meat factory, and this apartment block that you're talking about. I think all goes down to how well the production design in this movie is, because all these locations are really well designed. They're really interesting, especially this like Aztec themed apartment. Like it's just. It feels really alien, and I like that. It's really different, and I like that all these locations are so different. It's really nice.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a well-made film all round. You know, from that set design to special effects to even the costume design. Really, you sort of look at that. You know, it's rich. It's very rich and vibrant. In terms of the costumes and stuff, but I would like to get on to relatively quickly into my the crowning glory of this film. Really is I want to say formidable, but he's not really, Mr. King Willie.
Yes.
Now, the one thing I could say that this film would have benefited from more is more King Willie.
They say you on top. To me.
They say you offering me favors. Tell me why, Babylon, Mr. Policeman.
More of Calvin Lockhart, and I think just a couple of little scenes sort of peppered in somewhere of King Willie, because I think it's just, he plays it so creepy, and he has some very sort of interesting dialogue, and I think for him to have that scene, he's built up as this massive sort of figure in the sort of drug underworld in LA, and the only sort of, as cool as it is, he is conducting his business in an alley full of shit.
Yes. And he's not protected at all. Like, the guys drive away and he's just stood there in this filthy alleyway. But it's such a cool scene, that scene. Like, just the confrontation between the two. Like, the dialogue is really interesting. It's really... King Willie as a character is really cool. And I just love that he's not really paying attention to Harrigan. He's just throwing his bones on that oil drum, and it's like, his costume's really cool as well. He's got like this metal breastplate of like Africa, and he's got like the long dreads and the scars on his face. Like, I definitely would agree that I would love to have seen, like, just have one more scene of him or something before the inevitable happens. He's great. Definitely,
because you do get this sort of, it's almost like a build up, isn't it? And I think it's of him, he's drawing his sword or his knife or whatever, and preparing to fight, and you're almost like, yes, this is going to be a bit of a battle kind of thing, and then it's just bang, cut to him screaming and carrying the head down the alleyway, and that's it. Your two biggest gangs and gang leaders and stuff are gone. They're out of the picture, and it's on to the focus of a showdown with Harrigan.
Yeah, I do love that transition though, when he faces off against the Predator, and then it's just instant cut to
screaming head,
beheaded.
Yeah, definitely.
I also really like I forget the guy's real name, but the guy who plays Tony Pope, the
Morton Downey Jr.
Yes, him. Yeah. I like the peppering of news broadcasts throughout the movie. It kind of reminded me like a little bit of RoboCop type thing. Like,
yes, very, very Verhoeven.
This is Tony Pope, live from LA, from the city of fear, where the psycho vigilante killer continues his daily diet for murder. Bodies strung out, bodies with the skins ripped off, the hearts torn from the cadavers. And just recently, King Willie, the drug lord, the vicious drug lord, found in an alley just around the corner with his head cut off and his spinal column torn from the body, a fitting demise to the Prince of Powder.
It's predicting the future massively, really, isn't it? That's the sort of guerrilla sort of news that that you see coming out of America quite a lot, especially these days, especially sort of post-Trump, I suppose. But yeah, there's a lot of little. I mean, to me as well, you got to give credit to Kevin Peter Hall. He's never been, I think, up until probably Prey. I know we've had differing opinions of Prey, but that's probably the closest, because I think they went from Predator 2, then your Alien versus Predators, and I think through that sort of noughties to 2010, they were played by sort of bulkier guys, and it just didn't fit right to that sort of sleekness of the Predator or Predators. But Kevin Peter Hall, I think he's not being bettered as that role. I think you can see that sort of coming through even more in this one than the first one. He's obviously got a lot more comfortable and used to what he can do, and
Yeah, and they certainly say it in the making of documentary. Like, he knows his character really well, and the Predator, he's not fast moving. He's sort of quite still. He's patient. He's observing. He's always lurking in the background. And he does these like little subtle things, like when he's in the meat factory and he's going through his vision because he knows there's something wrong, and like just the way he moves and the way then he suddenly realizes that shit, somebody's in here, and it's like it's this just the way he moves his body. It's just I love that sort of stuff. Like he's giving that character life, and like you say, those later on Predator movies, like they were played by big burly guys that were just sort of running and throwing themselves around, and I don't feel like they were treating the Predator as a character. It was just literally a monster in the dark, sort of, you know. It was he actually
much more one-dimensional.
Yeah, like and I don't think
that's it, because of course you get this point then obviously where you get the Harrigan gets sort of one up on him in the slaughterhouse. Gets, you know, Gary Busey, Peter Keyes steps in and gets the most baffling death in the whole of the film. I'm quite sure what happens to his top half.
Yeah, I never got that. Even when I was a kid, I was always like, what's the deal with that?
It still makes no sense at all.
Oh well. Okay.
Get out of here, Harrigan. I want to save your ass. This is between me and him.
But it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you know, you can and then it's on the run basically. It's not, you know, it knows that Harrigan's got one up on it, and it's effectively hightailing it back to its ship.
Yeah.
But Harrigan is, you know, the little subtle things in this movie. To be fair, it wasn't something I really picked up on before, and this sort of last watch, because it's not really. It's quite reasonably subtle. Is that obviously Danny Glover's character Harrigan is scared of heights, and
yeah,
it's sort of there, but not very. It's not sort of, you know, it's not like he's going, oh God, I'm scared of heights kind of thing. I noticed it a lot more on this last sort of rewatch, and you get that, you know, it's why you sort of slow at going. Not that you wouldn't be slow sliding down a fucking drain pipe that's half hanging off and stuff like that, but you know, you get this in that last act, that third act, you know, into the third act, you have this complete reversal of it's now Harrigan chasing the Predator, and you know, it is all about revenge. It's all about, you know, doing right by his team and all that sort of thing. And it again, Kevin Peter Hall, even though, you know, well, Kevin Peter Hall and Stan Winston's team as well, you know, that's portrayed quite well, I think, in the design of the Predator and the movements and how it's sort of acting, because it is just on the run.
And to go back to the point about Harrigan being scared of heights, like, it's kind of nice that they did a little thing like that, because when you think about the first movie, like, compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, he only really had a fear of this Predator, but he wasn't really scared. He was determined to kill it no matter what. It kind of makes Harrigan a bit more human, like that he's got this vulnerability, this like fear of heights. Like Chief Brody's scared of water, even though he's still going to go out there to kill the shark. Like Harrigan's scared of heights, and we learn that right at the start of the movie, and it's brought up, you know, a couple of times. But even though he's scared of heights, he's still going to tackle this obstacle to get the Predator, and like, you know, it adds something to his character, and it's just like a little thing like that. Doesn't seem much, but it's, you know, it's something. You know, it expands that character. It makes them a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, like I say, it's very subtle. I think, but you know, even Arnie's pretty much beaten by the Predator.
Yeah,
you know, it's that look of it standing under the log at the end.
Yeah,
you know, and Harrigan gets. I think it's sort of, it's not really there in the film, but I think the idea is that this Predator is a young Predator trying to prove himself, and obviously when we get to I think really what really sort of lifts this film up as a good sequel is that, you know, it's not an ending of he just kills it. You've got this expansion of the mythology. You've got it creates a lot of interest, you know. It's not just, you know, they're not just barbaric aliens that are killing people. He's there to prove himself as a warrior, and these other elder predators can see Danny Glover is a worthy opponent.
Yeah,
and you know, and let him live.
And like, that's what a sequel, I suppose, has got to do, like, instead of just rehashing the same thing, like, we have to have a bit of what we already know. So we have the Predator, it's now in a new location. We have a bunch of new characters that are going to have a confrontation with the Predator. We're going to learn some of the things we already know, but then it's given us more information, a bit more backstory. So we've got new weapons. We've got like an idea right at the end of the movie that these things have been here for a long time and that they've been coming here, and they have this honor system. Like, you know, you killed one of ours, but we respect you. We see you as a worthy opponent. So there is a respect there, and you know, it's just things like that that build on the mythology.
Have an antique.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah.
That's it. I always sort of wonder, what did he do after that? Do you think he just sort of kept that, or did some research into it? I mean, obviously, it is something that comes up in the latest film, and you know, there wasn't another direct sequel until Predators, which did this whole plucking people up and dropping them and their thing that which just didn't work for me anyway.
Had some good ideas, but I just, you know, I didn't gel with it as much as I wanted to.
And the Predator, which was just baffling.
That deserves a whole episode in itself to talk about that.
Exactly. But then I wouldn't think we're differing on opinions of Prey.
Yeah.
But to me, you know, even, you know, when I first saw Predator 2, you'd not had any of the other sequels at that point, not had any of the Alien versus Predators or anything like that. To me, that was always the logical next step. Is, you know, we've seen that they've been here before and they've been here in the past. So why wouldn't you
show us that, see some of that? Yeah,
yeah.
And I think that's a good idea for them to go forward to do more Predator movies, to do something in that vein of, all right, so this one's going to be set in Vietnam, or we're going to do one in World War II. So, you know, the Americans and the Germans are going to try and work together to tackle this alien foe or something like that, I guess. But I think Predator is a bit like Alien in the fact that when it boils down to it, it's going to be the same movie, really. It's just going to be people versus an alien monster. And if you're fine with that, then there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think you just have to make an interesting story instead of don't rehash the same stuff all the time. Just make something a little bit different. And I'm sure we'll get into Prey at some point in an episode or something like that. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows that I didn't hate Prey. I wanted to like it. I wanted to like it a little bit more, but I didn't.
Before you get some hate.
Yeah. Sorry.
But, you know, and then you get cool little bits, you know, like the trophy room and stuff that shows you that, you know, they're not just coming here and picking us off. You know, they're going to different things. You've got the little alien head there that the alien skull, that you know, sent all the rumours flying until we got the debacle that was Alien versus Predator. I say that, but I've watched it now in the times. It's still got some redeeming qualities to it. God bless it.
Yeah, it's interesting in its own way.
You know, I think it does the right things that you want a sequel to do.
I agree.
For me, I think, you know, it expands on that mythology, gives you a different setting, gives you more people to kill, which you want to see. It gives you more inventive ways to kill them, and just a little shout out while I'm mentioning that of the net, the wire net.
Yeah.
Such a cool little gimmick for this film. And it sort of comes up in obviously subsequent stories, but you know, it does what you want. It changes things up a little enough, gets you invested, lots of action, lots of gore, lots of violence.
And the thing is as well, even if we had great weapons, great cinematography, you know, a cool design for the Predator and great action scenes, like if we didn't have good characters, then it would be boring, or a good story. But I feel like there's a good story here, and I like the characters. Like Danny Glover's great in this, Bill Paxton's great. They're interesting characters that I want to know more about. So that's the glue that holds this film together. So I think it did a good job of expanding the lore and being a good sequel. It It had good actors, good
Well, it
characters.
sets up that, the way that the first Predator, it sets up that these guys all know each other, and they worked as a team and everything else. And you get that similar vibe with obviously Harrigan and his team, and Jerry coming in, and he is accepted, and he cares. They care about him, and everything else. So it's by no means a sort of one-dimensional action film. I think it sets everything going really nicely.
Yeah, the people aren't red shirts just to be killed for mindless entertainment. Like, there actually are decent characters in this. And some of the dialogue's great. I mean, we didn't get in the original film one of my favourite pieces of dialogue, which
means you're cutting off my dick and shoving it up my ass.
God damn it, Mike.
Or the lions, the tigers.
Oh my.
Oh my.
A fucking alien.
A fucking alien. Yes, we've maybe not talked enough actually about Gary Busey, but we could talk for days.
I don't think, I mean, I haven't looked, but his motorcycle crash was in 1988, so they would have been filming this in 89, so I imagine this might have been the first film, or close to the first film, that after the crash.
Yeah, I think they do mention that, because they'd say he was telling everybody about his near-death experience. And
December 4th, 1988, 1:15 in the afternoon, I hit the concrete going 45 knots. And I had some out-of-body experiences, and I went to the other side. So there's a real curious element in what is out of this world, and we're just merely a speck in the whole thing.
And somebody says something about Maria Conchita Alonso's. She likes something, I can't remember what it is.
Onions, like she loves onions.
Onions.
Yeah.
Oh, she loves her onions. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is probably about a 35-minute documentary on YouTube.
It is worth a watch.
And there's a good 15 minutes of Gary Busey just talking bollocks.
Yeah, and it's great.
And I can imagine him being really annoying on set as well.
Yeah, he must have been pretty grating.
You get in the movies, and what happens? You get some sunglasses that cost $5,000. You lose them in the chopper, they take them away, you never see them again. They say it's an e-ticket ride, but it's not. It's a Fox ticket ride, and I'm having a ball.
But there we go.
Yeah, and I'll just say that whole action set piece in the slaughterhouse is really cool. Like, I love how they go from the red light of that trailer into the warehouse, and it's all blue light, and it's just really cool. I like that. It's a really nice style. It looks good.
Okay, so there we go. I think definitely, two choices that are very sort of close to our hearts, really, I suppose.
I would agree. Definitely.
It would be hard for me to sort of say, to sort of shit on anything, really, in terms of Gremlins 2. It's something I've watched multiple times, same with Predator 2. They're very much of a time, I suppose. That sort of obviously came out in the same year. I think even something like RoboCop 2, I think, was 1990 as well. I think you've got a lot of sort of sequel fever, really, early 90s, late 80s, with some of the blockbusters and that. And I think these are two really good examples of doing it right, but in different ways.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird that both of ours were released in 1990. They both had 2 in the title, and both of them had amazing special effects artists work on the film. So, like, mine was Rick Baker, yours was Stan Winston. So it's kind of like a nice thing that joins them together. I kind of feel like I know my pick maybe got better reviews than Predator 2, but I don't think Predator 2 deserved those bad reviews. It's definitely not as bad as they were making out, and it's definitely an underrated sequel. And I would have picked it myself, but I'm a Joe Dante Gremlins man, and it was the one that just came to me straight away, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
So what other ones did you maybe sort of consider for picking?
Well, weirdly, you said RoboCop 2. That did cross my mind, because that also has a special place in my heart. I loved that as a kid. It's an interesting sequel. I also thought about Poltergeist 2 as well, because that's one I really like.
Good call.
Yeah.
Well, I had a few sort of rather, and interestingly, Apart from what, I mean, one I did consider was, because it gets a lot of hate, and I like it, there's problems with it, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2.
Yeah. I don't think it's as bad as people make out.
As a potential discussion for another episode. Exorcist 3?
Yes, well...
Perhaps not maybe underrated, because I think it's got decent reviews when it was released.
Yeah.
Reasonably decent. But it's definitely a lot better than people would probably have you believe. Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yes, I mean, come on. That's, for me, that's pretty close to on par with the first one. It's a great sequel.
Yeah, that is something I would probably argue is it maybe even a touch better, but that's maybe for another podcast.
Yeah, no.
And Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Yes, that's another instance of a sequel doing something totally bizarre and wacky and it working for me. It's great.
But there's a lot out there. There's a lot that I think are considered inferior just because they're sequels.
Yeah,
which is a bit unfair at times.
Yeah, I would have said The Lost World, because that's another one that's kind of close to my heart, because I watched that a lot when I was a kid, and it's not perfect, but I don't think it's as bad as people made out at the time. And I mean, compared to some of the Jurassic Park / Jurassic World movies we've got now, it's the second best movie in my opinion out of the series.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't argue with that. So that wraps up our discussion on those. How are you feeling?
Yeah, pretty good. I enjoy talking about my pick and yours as well, because they're both movies I love. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and I hope if anybody listened that they enjoyed us rambling about them.
So it leads you, should I say, to tell us what are we going to be discussing on episode 2.
Okay, so my pick for the next episode is best Stephen King movie that has Stephen King in it. So it has to be a film that is based on a novel by Stephen King or was written by Stephen King, screenplay, Sleepwalkers, for example. But he has to have a cameo in the film, so that kind of narrows it down a little bit. So there's going to be no Shawshank, no Green Mile, no The Mist. So it has to be a Stephen King movie with Stephen King in it.
Okay.
So how do you feel about that?
I think that's one I'm going to have a look at and see which ones he was actually in. There's nothing that necessarily springs to mind apart from one, but I didn't think that was overly great, so probably won't pick that. But yeah, I think that's going to have to. I'm going to have a look on the old IMDb and see.
Yeah, it's there's not many, but there's a few to pick from. I think there's gold in them there hills. Not much, but yeah, and no doubt we'll end up probably picking the same movie, but that's not how this podcast works. So because it is my turn to pick the theme, that means that Pete gets first pick, and I get the second pick. So if he picks the same thing as me, then I'm in trouble. I've got to look for something else. So it's really going to make me think. But I think it's something interesting. It's something different. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you pick.
Well, it's really sort of narrowing it down to a genre now. Into it's something a little less wide open as well. So it should sort of lead to some similar discussion as well.
But yeah, that is my pick, and that will be the next episode of the Movie Duel podcast.
So why don't you tell the good people about how they can interact with us?
Yes, I shall. So this is quite a new podcast, but we have a social media. We have a Facebook page. So if anybody of you out there that has listened to this and enjoyed it or hated it and want to give us a suggestion or anything like that, just get in contact with us, then you can do that on our Facebook page, the Movie Duel podcast. There will be a link in the description. So if you just click that link or cut and paste it, go straight there, and yeah, just get in contact with us. And we want to have conversations with people about movies because it's what we love. So yeah, we want to open it up to everybody. If you feel like you have a good suggestion for us for an episode, then let us have it. We'll discuss it, not a problem. So yeah, you can hit us up on the social medias, as they say. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so once again, I just want to say thank you very much for any of you that listen to the whole podcast, and we really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you very much. We've had a really good time talking about movies. So it just leaves me to say goodbye from me, and
get to the chopper.
Bye, everybody.